Alright, so, hello, this is Demon Dream, also known as Trakena on the servers, and this is just a thought that's been spinning around and around in my head, and I figured, well, if I'm going to obsess over it, maybe other people have too, so, because I've seen it come up once or twice in different conversations. People feel a call or a pull or even just an intellectual interest in a god that's not normally their cup of tea. So that's... If I'm gonna start at the beginning, I should start at the beginning. So, I am an unabashed Elder Scrolls nerd. My gateway into the fandom was the Skyrim game, and after that I've been hooked. I haven't been able to get my hands on Morrowind or anything like that, and to some extent I'm not sure that I want to because, I mean, the graphics look like they suck. But before you get out your pitchforks, I really love the Elder Scrolls, and I would always go really deep into making backgrounds for my characters. I mean, you know, the first couple characters were just kill Alduin, take over the world, but after that I started getting a little bit more finesse, a little bit more, doing a bit more research, for example, on how to make the best necromancer character, or what have you. But some common themes kept popping up in my characters no matter what I did, no matter what I was going for. I would always go for a Khajiit. I generally couldn't do sneaky thief lifestyle. I always ended up stabbing someone. And always, without fail, I would go back to Namira. Most, I think, players have one or the other Daedric gods that Daedric princes that they go to. Azura seems like a pretty popular one, Sheogorath, Hircine, but it was always Namira for me, and yeah, she's not the most popular by any means, and there's good reason for that. She is the Daedric prince of repulsive things, the deep, dark places of the world that you really don't want to stare at too long. She has something to do with the dead, and just the whole entire lore and cosmogony and things like that that the Elder Scrolls Bethesda people have set up is really, really interesting, and I really like what they've done with it. But yeah, for me it was always Namira. So, you know, cannibalism, could it be a power trip? Maybe. Could Freud have something to say about it? Possibly. Could it be some sort of weird manifestation of my anxiety-driven autophagy? Maybe. But it's a fun game, it's a fun playstyle, and who doesn't like to, you know, devour the flesh of their enemies just to prove how utterly defeated they are, right? So, I'm a vicious nerd, and I accept it. But, as a self-proclaimed nerd, I am also an incorrigible Ravenclaw, as I might have mentioned in a previous video, and I thought to myself, so they've created these entire pantheons, multiple ones. There's the Daedra, the Aedra, you know, other fantasy god things mixed in, and you can definitely see the influences of Cernunnos, maybe, in Hircine, Dionysus in Sanguine, Aphrodite in Dibella, stuff like that. But then, if all of that's the case, then what was the inspiration for Namira? Where did they draw their, you know, I mean, I respect the fact that they're artists in their own right, and there's some things that just, I mean, it's pretty easy to make a general god of water, for example. Or it's pretty easy to make a fantasy god of, I don't know, architecture, clockwork, even. But surely there had to be some sort of real-world root that they drew from to help create Namira. Because, like I'd noted when I first played it, and you first, in Skyrim, you meet up with Iola, and you go to Reach Cliff Cave, and you kill all the Draugr, and you get back into that shrine room thing with the big table, and there's this massive table altar statue amalgamation with a really vicious dangly part on it, and it looks like it's really got some Mesoamerican vibes to it. Like, is it just me? Or, okay, so there's the bat bowl at the bottom of it, and the centipede looking thing, and then, like, right there between the mantis prongs, there's a little tiny face. And that little tiny face, and plus some of the just aesthetic, to me looks a lot like some Mesoamerican art I've seen, the Olmec jaguar masks. Which would make sense. I mean, not to be all over terrible generalizations, but the Aztecs and other cultures around that area are somewhat famed, perhaps out of proportion, for their human sacrifice. So for a goddess of cannibals in a fantasy game, I'll roll with it, okay. But, yeah, I wanted to know where she came from. So I went looking. And, oh man, I can't believe I have to do this while I'm recording, but Warhammer 40k, that's what it was. So I was doing some research into where she came from, other people's theories, things like that. And someone said that Namira had a lot of resemblance to a god of disease from Warhammer 40k. I have no idea what that is beyond some vague maybes. But, okay, got a disease, I can roll with this. But the god's name, the fantasy god's name, that they said Namira was heavily inspired by was Nurgle. The way they spell it is N-U-R-G-L-E, so kind of like gurgle, except Nurgle, which I can appreciate a good word pun. But me being just irrevocably swallowed up by Mesopotamia, never to return again. Unintentional pun there, road of no returning, haha. Nurgle, Era, Meslamtaea, the husband of Ereshkigal. Huh. Really? Is that... I mean, I could see the influence a little bit of Nergal with this Nurgle character in this fantasy game. And I could see the influence of this character in Elder Scrolls. They seem to have ditched a lot of his more fiery sun aspects to focus on the disease and plague aspects, but I could see it, and the name was damning enough. So, that's interesting. I mean, Nurgle himself does not line up perfectly at all with Namira, because the way Bethesda describes Namira is she's the goddess of the dark places, repulsive things, the things people don't want to look at, beggars, cannibals. Her people wallow in their wretchedness and react violently to attempts to save them. Now, the Mesopotamian gods definitely would not be about that. The goddess specifically entrusted with the care, I mean, all of them to some extent, but the goddess specifically entrusted with the care of the homeless and the downtrodden and those rejected by society is Nanshe. And she's very compassionate, and I've prayed a lot to her. Just the sheer amount of relevance she has to my life is unbelievable right now. Excuse me. But, yeah. The Mesopotamian reaction to there's a homeless person isn't, the homeless person is happy where they are, it's the homeless person needs some help. So I can appreciate that. And, I'm sorry, I'm really just rambling at the mouth, but I'm kind of thinking out loud, so. Yeah. And this Daedric prince is, yeah, the dark places. Her plane of oblivion is called the Scuttling Void. And she's all about the dark and nasty and repulsive and gross. And, but more importantly, she's the Lady of Decay. And through decay, after a fashion, comes life, which I've always found that dynamic really interesting. And you can actually find some of that in Ereshkigal. Now, she's far from a goddess of decay. Closest I've found to that would be, what was her name? Drujnasha or something like that? The Zoroastrian Lady of Decay who automatically inhabits the bodies of corpses. And that's why you need to treat corpses carefully, because if you don't, then basically you'll be cursed. I'm not an expert in Zoroastrian anything by any means, but basically it's just miasma. So either way, yeah, I haven't found any gods in Mesopotamia that revel in the repulsive or that are in charge of decay. I mean, you could find something close in maybe Ninersag, but she's more of a general mother. So I would say probably Ereshkigal, because she's the mother of the dead. She welcomes you into the land of no returning. She's, in a way, a counterpart to Inanna. And just her description in the Descent of Inanna, where she sits on her throne as dressed like a mourner in rags, with her hair swirling around her shoulders like leeks, which I take to mean kind of unwashed, with nails like pickaxes. Now that's a distinct corpse reference, because your nails don't grow after you die, but your body does desiccate, so it looks like they grew. Either way, there's some heavy corpse imagery there. But on the other side of the coin, Ereshkigal is also depicted as very beautiful, because she managed to seduce Nergal when he came down to the underworld to apologize for offending her. And yeah, that entire story is wonderful. But Either way, I'm getting myself sidetracked. Because what I wanted to touch on was Nergal. If I want to go to a god to pray for my ancestors, then I go to Ereshkigal. If I want a protective god, then Nuska is more my speed, and he's very near and dear to my heart. I mean, I'm not sure if he was ever explicitly worshipped in that fashion. Nuska is the minister of Enlil. Yes, the minister of Enlil. But he also takes his part in burning away evil magic. The Malku text in particular talks about that. So, yeah, he's the lamp at night. His iconography is a tiny clay lamp. So, considering the fact that for a good portion of my life I've been afraid of the dark, and my anxiety kills me, and I get nightmares, and it's just all around awful, I started going to Nuska, and now I go to him anytime I am utterly terrified. So, protective gods for the win. But, yeah, so if I want a protective god, then I go to Nuska. If I wanted to go to a god because my blood is hot and I'm ready to crush some skulls, probably play Skyrim, then I would probably go to Inanna. I prayed to her sons, Shara and Lulal, once, in gratitude for the relationship between me and my dad that allowed me to start learning how to shoot a pistol, because Shara and Lulal are the sons of Inanna. So it made sense in my head at the time, and it was a great time, so I'm just gonna roll with that. But, and if I want to go to a sun god, about the summer heat, or, you know, sunlight in the fields, or travel god, or something like that, then I go to Utu. Utu. I mean, he's far from the only solar god in the pantheon, but he's pretty much the preeminent one. So, yeah, Shamash. So what I'm getting at is that in my practice, I don't normally have any sort of reason to approach Nergal. I mean, ordinarily, like, if I'm doing something heavily formal, then I might approach him out of respect for his relationship with Ereshkigal. But, yeah, I don't normally have a reason to approach him. He's not really on my mind very much. Most of the reasons I could see for going to him, I just sort of naturally go to other gods instead. So Nergal is not my typical pagan cup of tea, as it were. And I've seen other people online say things like, I'm a weak little bookworm who's never raised a hand in my life. Why do I feel like I'm being approached by Thor? Or stuff like that. I think for all of us, there's at least one god out there who, just by nature of the way our practice works, or what we need out of our religion at the time, there's just a god out there that we don't normally pay much mind to. I mean, Ninurta, I suppose, would be like that for me. Because, I mean, he's an agriculture and rain god. And while I sometimes pray to him concerning storms and things like that, he's not really heavily relevant to my practice. But considering the gods I do go to on a regular basis, it just feels like there's a distinct place where I'm sort of dancing around the idea of approaching Nergal. It's like I'm worshipping all of these gods, but there's a hole right in the middle where, I mean, he would technically fit, I just haven't. And it's not like I feel that it's a requirement or that I should. It's more like I feel like I've just been deftly dodging the subject, as it were. Like it's something I don't want to look at too hard, or like it's something I'm almost deliberately, subconsciously not touching. And why would that be? I mean, I suppose it makes some amount of sense, because Nergal, when I started off on my baby pagan path, Tiamat was my gateway introduction, and then from her, Ereshkigal, because I am a morbid little girl who just really likes gothic crap. So Ereshkigal was my jam. Plus, I liked how strong she was and what she stood for. Admittedly, she wasn't the best fit for my life. I later found that in Nisaba, but I suppose I had more of an idealized version of Ereshkigal than what she actually was. But once I got my head around it, I still have the utmost respect for her. She's just not the right fit for me as a patron goddess, if that makes any sense. Matron, I suppose. But, yeah, so, and when I started off on my baby pagan path, myths change and evolve over the millennia, and Ereshkigal started off as the highest authority in the underworld. And then later on, whether it was a move by a king in question who wanted more male gods in positions of authority in the pantheon, or if it was just conflicting cultures or conflicting cults coming into contact and one absorbing the other, the myths vary. In one, Nergal offends Ereshkigal, she seduces him. Either he comes back, drags her down by her hair, and threatens her with an axe until she tearfully sort of offers him a last-minute, last-ditch, hey, don't kill me, you can be my king. Or he comes back down to the underworld and they joyfully embrace and have a beautiful marriage together. I've always preferred the beautiful marriage version, especially because to me, Ereshkigal, Nergal is her consort, he is not her superior. She is queen, and just because she has a husband, that does not mean she is automatically demoted. So I never really liked the idea of Nergal dragging her down by the hair and threatening her with an axe, and her sort of begging him off by saying, "Have my throne." You know, it never sat well with me. I understand it, but it just doesn't sit well with me. So for my personal practice, yeah, Ereshkigal is head of the pantheon, and, well, not pantheon. Ereshkigal is head of the underworld, and Nergal just sort of is her amazing, powerful, wonderful consort. But, yeah, when I first started off, I could get opinionated about the myths. I would take them very literally sometimes. So I was in this massive snit over Inanna for a long period of time because of, to me, how she'd been a brat and affronted a goddess who I revere, and, you know, thrown a tantrum like a toddler and did this thing, and just, yeah, I didn't think very highly of Inanna because of how she'd behaved towards Ereshkigal. But people mature, practices mature, and I realized it's a myth, it's trying to say something, and Inanna is much more than some sort of impetuous little brat who always wants what she can't have. Inanna is so much more than that, and I understand how other people respect her, and I respect her and go to her sometimes now. But from the same angle, in my baby pagan mind, Nergal had offended Ereshkigal, and because of that, I hated him. It was the whole God versus Satan influence, probably. But yeah, I've gotten over that, and I've made my internal amends with the idea of Inanna being an important force, not necessarily just for good in the world, but a key aspect of just how humans function. Inanna is one of those quintessential gods that just, yeah, she's really important. So I've made my amends with the idea of Inanna being solid awesome. I suppose maybe I've made my internal amends with the idea of Nergal being solid awesome because I honor him in his aspect as Ereshkigal's husband. But again, it's almost like I'm subconsciously, deliberately dancing around the issue. What is it about this god that I can't... I mean, I suppose he might just not be my cup of tea. But he's been really present in my thoughts lately. I've been thinking about death gods a lot lately, okay? Maybe it's something to do with fall. What with Nymeria from the Elder Scrolls, to that one creepy episode in Barnes & Noble with that book about Santa Muerte. And, yeah, that one conversation I heard of about someone syncretizing, conflating, I forget what the proper term is, Santa Muerte and Ereshkigal, seeing Ereshkigal and Santa Muerte as the same person. And I wasn't sure about that, but, you know, with a little bit of research I could sort of see it. But, yeah, there's some missing pieces here and there. But I could see it if someone wanted to do that. But, yeah. Nergal. He's been on my mind, and I could not figure out why. And he's not my cup of tea. I see no reason in my typical practice to go to him, so why am I thinking about him? It doesn't feel like some sort of, you know, divine call or anything like that. I mean, it could be. I don't know. It feels just sort of obsessive, like wiggling at a tooth that you know is gonna fall at some point. Just why won't it? Maybe it has something to do with the weather lately. It's been boiling hot. And that mixed with my whole tracing back in the mirror thing. And, yeah, I'm sorry if this video isn't making much sense. I'm mostly just thinking out loud, but I have a feeling some people out there might be able to relate. Maybe, possibly. Nergal is, if I recall correctly, he's the god of the dog days of summer, Sirius, the blazing bright star during the hottest days of the summer. It causes madness and disease and all sorts of plague and famine. Nergal is the god of the bright, burning noonday sun. He's a god of war, the seasons of war especially. A god of pestilence and plagues and famine. A god of the underworld who presides over the dead. In iconography, he's generally got a lion. His mace, the stone at the end of his mace, has 2 lion heads. And I believe if I ever make something for him, it'll probably an image of a mace with 2 lion heads. He's burning, he's bright, he's furious, he's implacable. He's a wonderful fit for Ereshkigal. He's vibrant and full of life, but it's not necessarily the sort of life that Dumuzid brings, the life that he brings to the fields. It's more just this burning, out of control, destructive, raging life that's also somewhat necessary, like burning the fields, for example. I forget the proper term for that, and it's going to bother me. But, yeah, burning the fields to sort of renew it. I don't know how that works exactly. I mean, I knew at one point, but I would have to go back and do research, and I'm currently on camera, so I'm not going to do that. But, yeah. Burning crops. Just the summer solstice. Mars. He was associated with Mars before the Romans got their sticky fingers on it. Or was it the Greeks? Either way, in Babylonian astrology, Nergal was associated with the planet Mars. Yeah. And maybe it's just because it's 91 degrees outside, and it's been so hot lately that I don't even need a blanket at night. Maybe it's the sickness, maybe it's the fear, maybe it's the need to draw up my own spine and find strength even when my glass is almost just completely tapped out. But something about Nergal has just planted his feet on my chest and said, okay, you're going to listen now. So, I haven't really drawn any conclusions with this at all. But mostly I'm just confused, really. But it helps me to think out loud sometimes. And I figured, you know, someone else might find it interesting. So here's a recording. But I think what I'm going to do with all of this confusion is light up some incense, set out some water, and a little bit of whatever food I have. I always feel terrible. I mean, I shouldn't. I mean, the gods don't expect anything more than what you can give. But I still always feel terrible offering 38-cent ramen. And not even the entire cup, just a little bit of it. Because that's all I have. But, because they deserve so much more than that. Heck. A, breakfast sausage or something. But, I can't afford that. So, yeah. I think I'm gonna light up some incense, set out some water and some food, pour out a little bit of alcohol at the base of a tree, and tell Ms. Lamtaya that I'm listening. So, this has been a very long ramble from Demon Dream, also known as Tricana on the Discord servers, and perhaps familiar to a few on Tumblr as Mastabas and Mushoshu. So with that, I'm signing out, and whoever you are, wherever you may be, good health, and I will see you when I have another video. Bye.